You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
To enjoy this episode ad-free, please visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
When a 17-year-old beauty school student went missing in February 2010, the residents of a small Washington town were left stunned. Then just days later, the teen's body was discovered by a passerby on the banks of the Columbia River. What began as a desperate search quickly turned into something far more disturbing. An investigation filled with false leads, unsettling rumors, and a suspect hiding in plain sight. Because in this case, the answers weren't just buried in secrets. They were written in the forensic evidence. This is Forensic Tales, episode 326, The Murder of Mackenzie Cowell. Welcome to Forensic Tales. I'm your host, Courtney Fretwell. Forensic Tales is a weekly true crime podcast with a forensic twist. Each episode features real stories highlighting how forensic science was used to uncover the truth. If you enjoy deep dives into real cases and the science behind them, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you want even more content, including monthly bonus episodes and behind-the-scenes updates, you can join our community over on Patreon. The support there truly helps keep this show going. To learn more, visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales. Let's get into today's case. It's easy to believe something like this could never happen in a place like Wenatchee, a quiet town, tight-knit community, the kind of place where nothing ever goes wrong, until a teenage girl goes missing and everything changes. In February 2010, this small Washington town was getting ready to turn out for the annual Apple Blossom Parade. And it only makes sense that people would do that. This particular town quite literally sits in endless apple orchards. But that year, a young teenage girl was missing from the festivities. Her name was 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell. Standing at over 5 feet 8 inches, Mackenzie was known to people as being both strong and beautiful, a young woman with her entire life ahead of her. If you spent any amount of time with Mackenzie, then you knew just how much she loved to dance. She would dance anywhere and everywhere she went, from the grocery store to the gas station to fill up her car. Wherever she went, she danced her way through. So, given her bright and vivacious personality, it only made sense that she was a member of her high school's dance and cheer team. But dance wasn't her only passion. She also liked hair, makeup, and modeling. On top of being a high school senior at Wenatchee High School, she also worked as a model and studied cosmetology at the Wenatchee Academy of Hair Design in downtown. So as you can imagine, she was a very busy teenager. Her typical day looked like this. She would wake up at around 6:15 in the morning so she could be out the door by 7:15. She would spend all day in class, then typically either head to the beauty school or to cheer practice. She wouldn't get home until nearly dinner time each day. Mackenzie was just a young, beautiful girl, working hard to make sure she had a bright and successful future ahead of her. She grew up in your typical all-American family household, and the town of Wenatchee felt safe. It felt like a good place to raise a family. And her boyfriend, Joaquin Villasano, felt the same way. The only thing he loved more than living there was Mackenzie. By all accounts, he was head over heels in love with her. She was the best thing to happen to him. The reason I say all of this is because, at the end of the day, there was a young girl who lost her life. A life that didn't deserve to be taken in the way that it was. The nightmare started on February 9th, 2010. That night, Mackenzie made plans with her dad, Reed Cowell, to have dinner. It was just supposed to be a fun father-daughter dinner together. Mackenzie was growing up, so anytime Reed got to spend time with her, he was a happy camper. On any given day, Mackenzie got out of beauty school at 5 o'clock on the dot. So when 5:40 rolled around and Reed hadn't heard from her yet, he tried calling her. Not only did she not answer, but her cell phone went straight to voicemail, which was a little odd. Like any 17-year-old girl, Mackenzie never turned her cell phone off. It was practically glued to her hip at all times. By 8 o'clock that night, Mackenzie's family was in full-blown crisis mode. She had missed her curfew and still wasn't home, and no one had heard from her since 3 o'clock that afternoon, after she was last seen on surveillance video leaving the Academy of Hair Design, walking to her car, and driving away. She had told a few of her classmates that she would be back in less than 15 minutes, but she never came back. At around this same time, she also sent her boyfriend a text saying, "Hey, what's up?" A seemingly ordinary text message until her family learned that was the last time her cell phone was ever used. By the evening of February 9th, Mackenzie had been reported missing to the police. She's only 17 years old, and her family had no reason to suspect she had simply run off. But then came more bad news. Later that night, a homeowner in remote Chelan County reported an abandoned car near his driveway. And when police ran the car's registration, they learned it was registered to Mackenzie's dad, Reed. The car had been parked near Mission Ridge, a ski area about 40 miles from her parents' house. And while Mackenzie's purse and some clothes were found in the car, her debit card and cell phone were both missing. When investigators searched around the vehicle, they noticed something that immediately stood out as a red flag. There was only one set of footprints leading away from the car. So either Mackenzie drove 40 miles away from her house, parked her car near a ski area, and then walked away on her own, or someone else abandoned it there, hoping no one else would find it. The next morning, February 10th, more police officers joined the search for Mackenzie. They brought in helicopters to search from the sky. They issued search warrants for her cell phone and social media activity. They spoke with all her classmates and friends. The local police also called in the FBI to help with the investigation. And it wasn't just the police who spent their days out there searching for her. Random strangers from the community also joined in hopes of there being a happy ending to this story. But sadly, that's not what happened. 4 days into the search, Mackenzie's father got the phone call that every father dreads. The FBI called saying they had found a body and they thought it was his daughter. In a bend of the Columbia River called Crescent Bar, Mackenzie's body was found in the shallow water. The body had been discovered by someone driving by who saw something in the water that caught his attention. This was a spot about 20 miles away from Wenatchee. Here's where the story takes another disturbing turn. The autopsy results. Not only had Mackenzie's young life been stripped away, but the autopsy showed that her last few moments on this earth were marked by sheer violence. Her ultimate cause of death would be listed as a combination of strangulation, blunt force trauma to the head, and a deep laceration to the neck. And in another unthinkable act of violence, her killer had attempted to saw off her arm. The police knew this because there was a knife still sticking out of her shoulder when they got there. But there was no evidence that she had been sexually assaulted. This was only about one thing and one thing only: murder. 2 days later, on February 15th, 2010, around 1,800 people attended her funeral at the Town Toyota Center in Wenatchee. It was just a day filled with sorrow and pain. Her entire dance team was there, and they released hundreds of balloons into the air while yelling, "Mackenzie, we love you." Mackenzie's mom, Wendy Cowell, even went on the local news and begged for answers. "It's important to my family and I for you to bring that person forward," she said. I don't think anyone realized it at the time, but Mackenzie's murder became the biggest investigation this little town had ever seen. No one could wrap their head around how or why this happened. Who would want someone like Mackenzie dead? A beautiful, smart, funny high school dancer who didn't seem to have a single enemy in the entire world? Naturally, the first person the police focused on was Mackenzie's boyfriend, Joaquin. Given their close relationship, he had to be the first person crossed off the list of potential suspects. But he completely denied hurting her. He said he didn't do it, and he had no idea who did. But just because he denied involvement, that didn't mean the police took their eyes off him. Instead, they kept the pressure on him. Joaquin was given a polygraph and reportedly failed at least one of the questions he was asked. But not all polygraph results can be trusted. Because through their investigation, the police learned that the boyfriend had an airtight alibi and wasn't Mackenzie's killer. However, the same couldn't have been said for another man in her life, Joey Fisher. Back in 2010, Joey Fisher was Mackenzie's mom's boyfriend, and the two definitely didn't have a good relationship. In fact, just one day before she was killed, Mackenzie apparently said to her mom that it was either him or me. That's how much she didn't like him. But could that have just been a teenage girl who didn't get along with her mom's boyfriend? It definitely wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But the police wondered if the mom's boyfriend could be their guy. Except there was a problem. They never found any physical or forensic evidence linking him to the murder. Sure, Mackenzie didn't like him and had actually gotten into a fight with him the day before she turned up missing. But there just wasn't any evidence linking Joey Fisher to the crime. So there was nothing the police could do about him. And eventually, he was officially cleared. For the first 2 months of the investigation, the police in Washington failed to make an arrest. And it wasn't because of a lack of effort. From the moment her body had been found, the police formed the official Mackenzie Cowell Task Force. It was made up of officers from multiple agencies, including law enforcement agents from the cities of Wenatchee and East Wenatchee, and from the counties of Chelan and Douglas. An FBI agent and 2 officials from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement were also involved. This quickly became the largest multi-agency investigation in the Wenatchee area since an attempted serial bombing in 1997. Yet, no arrests were made, despite over 800 interviews during the first few months of the investigation. But all of that was about to change. Insert Liz Reed. In 2010, Liz Reed was a college student by day and a police informant by night. And unlike Mackenzie, she didn't always live her life straight as an arrow. She had gotten into trouble over the years, doing things to feed her addiction to oxy. So she had been arrested several times for selling drugs or writing bad prescriptions. And what she shared with investigators working Mackenzie's case completely changed its course. She named 2 people, Sam Cuevas and Emmanuel Buda Cheros, two streetwise convicted criminals and drug dealers she occasionally hung out with. According to Liz Reed, Mackenzie's death was just a tragic case of mistaken identity. The men thought she was a police informant who had ratted on them, so they killed her. But in reality, Mackenzie had absolutely no connection as a police or drug informant. So it was just a bad case of mistaken identity by these two thugs. And to prove what she said was true, Liz Reed even told detectives that the men had shown her a video of the killing. She said that while watching it, Sam Cuevas, one of the alleged killers, said something to her like, "I choked that bitch to shut her up." So at this point, the police think they might finally have their suspects. They have a witness who said the men confessed. She saw an alleged video of the killing, and Liz Reed even described the murder weapon before it was even made public. So all of this information seemed very credible. But just before the authorities were about to move in and arrest the men, Liz Reed's story began to crumble. The first issue the police had was the alleged video of the killing. Despite spending months searching for this alleged video, the police were never able to find it. Even though Liz Reed claimed to have seen it, the video never surfaced. And when investigators pressed her about this, she eventually changed her story and denied seeing any video of Mackenzie's murder. Both men were eventually brought in and questioned by detectives. They confronted them with what the informant said, but both men denied any involvement, saying they were innocent. They even provided the police with alibis that seemed to have checked out. And based on both witness statements and phone records, the police determined the men were nowhere near the location where Mackenzie was murdered. So it seems like the informant's story about these two men being involved just wasn't credible. But just when investigators think they're back at square one, they learn about yet another possible suspect, a fellow classmate of Mackenzie's at the beauty school. His name was 29-year-old Christopher Scott Wilson, and in February 2010, he was also a student at the Academy of Hair Design. The reason why he became a suspect in Mackenzie's case was that in August that year, the police received a letter that they should look into Wilson. The letter said that he had an obsession with death, dead bodies, and serial killers. Christopher Wilson was certainly an interesting character for the police to consider. This was someone who literally had a tattoo of Hannibal Lecter on his arm and used to work at one of the local funeral homes because he liked being around dead bodies so much. And according to another beauty school classmate, Christopher Wilson had told him that he, quote, liked to cut up bodies. The letter had come from a guy named Theo Keys, who was yet another police informant. He had written the letter about Wilson while in jail for exposing himself to a barista. But it wasn't just the letter saying Wilson liked dead bodies and serial killers. It wasn't just because he worked at a funeral home. That's a profession thousands of people work in. And it wasn't just because he might have been eccentric and didn't fit the norm for this area of Washington. The reason he became a suspect in Mackenzie's murder was because of the forensic evidence found at the location where her body had been dumped. If you felt stuck trying to lose weight, you're not alone. Enter Weight Loss by Hers. It's designed to support you in reaching your goals. And Hers now offers access to an affordable range of FDA-approved GLP-1 medications, including the Wegovy pill and the Wegovy pen. Everything is 100% online through Hers. You'll connect with a licensed provider who will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your medication is delivered right to your door. No insurance necessary. Ready to reach your goals? Visit forhers.com/tales to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/tales. forhers.com/tales. Weight loss by hers is not available in all 50 states. Wegovy is the registered trademark of Novo Nordisk AS. To get started and learn more, including important safety information, Wegovy clinical study information, and restrictions, visit forhers.com. I don't know if it's because I'm a new mom, but I've been thinking more about sleep lately. I usually get around 9 hours of sleep each night, and I've been feeling great to tackle each day. For me, the big shift was realizing that sleep isn't just about hours. It's the foundation for everything: performance, mood, focus, recovery, even how you age. And here's the part that surprised me. You can't fully understand your sleep without looking at your lab tests. If your sleep is off, your results will likely show it with elevated inflammation and shifts in glucose and cortisol. And when sleep improves, that shows up too. That's what I appreciate about Function. It gives you real data so you know what's happening inside your body. Sleep isn't just a habit, it's biology. If you want a deeper look, whether you're improving it or troubleshooting, you have to measure it. I use this, and you should too. Own your health and start with your heart. Function gives you access to 160 plus lab tests each year, including advanced markers for heart health, inflammation, stress, hormones, and toxins for $365 a year. That's $1 a day. Learn more and join using my link. Visit functionhealth.com/tails and use gift code TAILS25 for a $25 credit toward your membership. At the river, investigators had recovered some of what they believed was Wilson's DNA. His YSTR was allegedly found on a piece of duct tape that had been recovered near Mackenzie's body. Wilson had provided police with a swab of his DNA on August 11th, and even though it wasn't totally conclusive, the crime lab determined the DNA on the duct tape could belong to Christopher Wilson. That was enough for detectives to bring him in for a formal police interview. But when questioned about being at Crescent Bar, Wilson denied ever going there. And when asked why his DNA would be there, Wilson shut down the interview and asked for an attorney. But the case against him was just beginning. On October 6, 2010, 8 months after Mackenzie's murder, Christopher Wilson was arrested on second-degree murder charges and held on a $1 million bail. And as the handcuffs were closed around his wrists, he showed zero emotion. The police's theory became that Mackenzie and Wilson had decided to meet the day she disappeared, and that he must have killed her just minutes after Mackenzie left their beauty school, and he was seen on surveillance camera coming out that same back door. The police also had at least 3 witnesses who said they saw a man matching Wilson's description near where her car had been abandoned. And remember that single set of footprints walking from it? The police suspected those belonged to Christopher Wilson. When it came to the forensic evidence against Wilson, the DNA found on the duct tape was just the beginning. When the police executed a search warrant of Wilson's apartment and sprayed luminol, the place lit up like a Christmas tree. There was a substantial amount of blood, almost all over the place, and when the police removed a portion of the stained carpet for testing, it came back positive for Mackenzie Cowell's DNA. Well, that's not nearly the end of the story, not even close. Christopher Wilson's mother hired one of the best defense attorneys she could afford to represent him, and that man was Washington State's own John Henry Brown, arguably one of the most high-powered defense lawyers in the state. His clients have ranged from Robert Bales, the American soldier who pleaded guilty to mass murder in Afghanistan, to serial killer Ted Bundy and barefoot bandit Colton Harris Moore. And as soon as he got the case, he and his co-counsel, Emma Scanlon, got together to start crafting their defense. They argued that the police had planted Mackenzie's DNA inside Christopher Wilson's apartment in order to frame him. According to Brown, more blood should have been found at the apartment, given just how brutal the murder was. Without going into too much detail, Mackenzie's jugular vein had been cut, and you don't need a medical degree to know that it typically causes a lot of blood loss. They also argued that the police fumbled the case by not arresting the real killers, Cuevas and Cerros, the two men named by the police informant. Part of John Brown's skepticism of the police in Wenatchee goes all the way back to the 1990s, when he represented several men who had been wrongfully convicted of sexual assaults. The charges against these men were completely made up, and as Brown called them, a witch hunt. What was interesting was that the same prosecutor who brought those faulty sexual assault charges forward is the same prosecutor assigned to Mackenzie Cowell's case. So once again, this county prosecutor and high-powered defense attorney were going to go at it. As the case prepared for trial, the judge made some pretty important decisions. The biggest was that Wilson's defense attorney was allowed to present evidence implicating Cuevas and Cerros as the killers. The judge also ruled that the prosecution would not be allowed to bring up Wilson's work history at area funeral homes, his tattoo of Hannibal Lecter, or his online activity on DeviantArt and on serial killer forums. One of Wilson's favorite TV shows at the time was Dexter, the hit Showtime series, where the killer often brings his victim into a room draped in plastic to keep the crime scene clean. The judge just didn't want that information to taint the jury. But Wilson still had to contend with the forensic evidence. The prosecution still had two very big pieces of evidence that seemed to implicate him in the murder. The first, of course, was his DNA being on the duct tape found at the scene, and number two, Mackenzie's blood inside his apartment. Prosecutors felt pretty confident that there wasn't an innocent explanation for her blood to be there. And as far as the defense's claim that there should have been more of it, that didn't make much sense. Why would any amount of her blood be there, whether it's a small or large amount? Even with one of the state's best defense lawyers on your side, the forensic evidence was going to be an uphill battle. To no one's surprise, the allegations of planting forensic evidence didn't go over well with the police in Washington, and they denied anything like that ever happening. As far as how the police and prosecutors say Mackenzie ended up inside Wilson's apartment, no one is 100% sure. But they theorized that maybe the two had become friends, and Wilson had convinced her to go to his apartment that day. But that's something Wilson's mom adamantly denies. She says the two weren't friends on any social media. They weren't friends on Facebook. They weren't friends on MySpace. So there was no reason for her son to invite Mackenzie over to his apartment. She, just like her son's defense attorney, believes the police were simply trying to frame Wilson for the murder. She also believes Sam Cuevas and Emmanuel Carros are the real killers. The two small-time drug dealers Liz Reed once swore confessed to her. What's bizarre is that before Wilson's scheduled trial, Liz Reed changed her story yet again and now told Christopher Wilson's lawyers her story about seeing that videotape of Mackenzie's murder. And she was prepared to testify under oath that it was all true. So at this point, she was slated to be the defense's star witness. But even without her, the defense still had to deal with the blood evidence. Mackenzie Cowell's blood was inside his apartment, and he couldn't explain how it got there. But right before Christopher Wilson was set to go to trial, there was yet another twist to the story. Prosecutor Gary Rison made Wilson an offer of a lifetime, plead guilty to manslaughter, and serve only 6.5 years in prison. But what do you think Wilson's response was? Maybe some of you think he accepted it. 6 years in prison is far better than life without the possibility of parole. Well, that's not what happened. Christopher Wilson rejected the offer made by prosecutors. He wanted to take his case to trial, despite what the forensic evidence suggested. And Liz Reed's story now had a new twist that threatened the prosecutor's claim that Mackenzie was killed inside his apartment. Liz Reed claims Mackenzie was actually murdered on a secluded bluff, and that she can prove it. She claimed that Buddha demanded she go there to find a ring ripped from Mackenzie's hand during the murder. And according to defense attorney John Henry Brown, the ring matches the ring seen in a picture of Mackenzie. And if true, Brown says Christopher Wilson is an innocent man. But here's where things get a little confusing. When the police showed the ring to Mackenzie's mom, dad, and boyfriend, none of them said they recognized it. These are the people who are the closest to her. So if anyone knew anything about what kind of jewelry she wore, it would have been these three people. But none of them recognized it. So the police concluded it wasn't Mackenzie's ring, and that Samuel Cuevas and Emmanuel Buda Cheros had absolutely nothing to do with this case. Once again, their informant, Liz Reed, was dead wrong. The two men she accused would later say those claims have ruined their lives. They couldn't even go to the grocery store without people looking at them like they were cold-blooded killers. They say Liz Reed is a total and complete liar. It's now May 2012, and the case against Christopher Wilson was set to go to trial. In fact, both sides were in the middle of jury selection when Wilson's defense dropped a bombshell no one saw coming. Instead of going to trial, Wilson was finally ready to accept a deal from prosecutors. The deal was for him to plead guilty to the first-degree manslaughter of Mackenzie, as well as first-degree robbery for taking her cell phone and second-degree assault for an unrelated case. And instead of potentially spending the rest of his life in prison, Wilson received a sentence of 14 years and 3 months in prison. But just because he was pleading guilty, he still refused to accept responsibility for Mackenzie's murder, saying he only accepted the deal because he didn't think he was going to receive a fair trial. During jury selection, his lawyer said that over 80% of the people they spoke to said they already thought he was guilty, so they didn't think they would ever get a fair trial, and accepting a plea deal was their best option. Before prosecutors even considered offering him another deal, they ran it by Mackenzie's family, who reportedly agreed. They had already spent years grieving her loss, and this deal would spare them from having to sit through a trial with an unknown outcome. At least this deal guaranteed Christopher Wilson would serve prison time. And even if he didn't want to accept responsibility, this guilty plea was essentially proof of that. One of the reasons prosecutors agreed to extend a second deal was the forensic evidence. They knew Mackenzie's blood was found inside Wilson's apartment, but they didn't have any evidence proving he was inside the apartment at the time the blood was left there. There's no way for us to know how a jury would have viewed that. But in the end, the police, prosecutors, and Mackenzie's family feel like justice was served. Christopher Wilson was officially found guilty of murdering Mackenzie Cowell in February 2010. But that still isn't quite the end of this story. Not long after Wilson accepted the deal, he filed a motion to withdraw it. But that motion was ultimately denied by the Washington Court of Appeals. The judges said they found no evidence suggesting he misunderstood the plea agreement he signed. Then, on December 11th, 2023, a now 43-year-old Christopher Wilson was released from prison after serving more than 11 years of his original sentence. That means, as of today, he is considered a free man. And in the end, this case is a reminder of just how powerful and how complicated forensic evidence can be. Because on paper, the science seemed to point in one direction. The kinds of findings that are supposed to bring clarity, supposed to tell a clear and undeniable story. But here, it didn't feel that simple. Questions about how that evidence got there when it got there, and what it actually proves still linger even all these years later. And that's what makes this case so unsettling, because forensic evidence is often seen as the gold standard, the closest thing we have to truth in a criminal investigation. But it's still only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And when the rest of that puzzle doesn't quite fit, doubt has a way of creeping in. What we do know for certain is that Mackenzie Cowell lost her life in an act of brutal violence. A 17-year-old with her entire future ahead of her. And while there may have been a conviction, whether there was ever true closure is something that still remains up for debate. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to support the show and help fund research, production, and editing, you can do so with a small monthly contribution on Patreon. Patreon supporters get early access to ad-free episodes and exclusive bonus content. You can learn more at patreon.com/forensictales. And if you enjoy the show, leaving a positive rating or review really helps others discover it. For a full list of sources used in this episode, visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. They make it super simple. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with coverage options tailored to your choices. Plus, you'll see which discounts you may qualify for, like the online quote discount or savings for paying in full. In fact, 99% of Progressive Auto customers earn at least one discount. See if you could save when you switch to Progressive. You'll feel good about making a savvy choice. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little extra cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.